Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to work on a viewer reel. Someone who lived in the area who brought this one by asked me if I couldn't take a quick service on it. This is a Penn Senator 9.0. It's the 115 reel. It's a left-handed variety, so I know I've done the 9.0 before, but we're going to do a 9.0 with the lefty side. Show you it's pretty much the same, except when it comes to loading the anti-reverse dog. So play along with me. These are great reels. We'll go see the internals on this one and show you how to clean it up, service it, and get it ready for the next season. So, as many of you know, I like to start with the taking the handle assembly off, and then we can get on to taking the side plate off and the like. A couple of things while we're kind of doing the basic piece. We want to make sure that we protect our hands if we can. You notice I'm wearing a latex glove. I like to keep the contaminants and junk off of that to the best that I can. Especially when I'm working on a lot of reels. There's a lot of greases and oils and other things in there, so why take a chance? I also use a parts basket. Many of you have seen that on the videos before. And as you're noticing now, I like to take the handle off by reversing the star drag, walking it outwards, as opposed to trying to lever it off and maybe having a bad consequence on the gear sleeve. And also the sequence that these pieces and parts came off. So I always recommend that you take pictures and follow along on the step-by-steps. If you like, you can go ahead and get the schematic for it. It's available at pennparts.com, as well as Mystic Parts, which is the new site for pennparts.com. In this case, it shows you the model 115, and it shows you an exploded version. So if you weren't paying attention as you were pulling these parts off of the handle here, you notice that you have the handle screw, the handle, and then you have a small washer, the star drag adjuster, a bigger washer, then the collar, which is right here. And one of the things that's interesting about this reel is you can service the drags without taking the side plate off. Sometimes they just kind of fall out. Sometimes you got to persuade them, but you can see that the drag washers will come out that way. I like to leave them on the stack while I work on the reel, but if you just wanted to service your drags, you do not need to remove the side plate and the bridge and all that other stuff to get there. So we're going to take the side plate off now. One of the things you'll notice is that these screws are bigger than the other reels you might work on, like a Long Beach or a Jigmaster or that. They have a wider slot and a thicker diameter to them. You want to make sure that you put the right screwdriver to the screws. You don't want to use a screwdriver that has a lot of play in that slot, for fear that if you get one that's a little tight, you may wind up stripping out the slot, and if you strip out the slot, then you've got to replace the screw. Another video we'll do sometime is how to get a broken screw out of a crossbar. We won't do it on this one. I'm laying these down. They'll go into my parts bucket eventually, but I always make a mental note on these. There are 3 screws that are shorter in length than the others. The long screws that we just took out are for the crossbars. The shorter screws, and there's an example right there, they go into the reel seat. And if you try to put the longer screw into the reel seat, this piece, this 1/4 inch or so, will protrude, and there's a risk that line will get tangled on that. So make sure that you make a note that these screws are 2 different lengths, and make sure that you know that the smaller length goes into the reel seat. There's another reason I'm laying them out there. These screws sometimes accumulate some corrosion and junk and want to start to bind into the cross posts. So it doesn't hurt to take these screws, put them in a little pile, and either add a drop of oil to them or hit them with something like a WD-40 just to keep them lubricated before you put them back in. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Just going to kind of stack them all up here. I'm just going to give it a quick spray of WD-40. This is a general lubrication to keep those threads lubricated when we go to put them back in. With that, I'm just going to kind of grab them. Another good reason to hold that glove. And go grab those screws. Let that lubrication sit in, kind of catch the threads and sit inside the parts basket there. And I noticed that there's some greening on this. This is interesting because I think Doug, the customer, picked this up used. The front side appearance is fine, but the greening kind of concerns me a little bit. So let's go ahead and pull this out. And yeah, we have a little bit of greening going on inside as well. The reel overall seems to be in pretty good condition, but we have a little bit here. That usually tells me that the reel hasn't been serviced in a while. And if that's the case, you want to make sure you clean that so that we don't run into trouble later. This is just a general tune-up. I don't spend a lot of time on cosmetics. I will go back on this one. Again, here's some greening going on there. There's some greening going on the cross posts. I'm not going to clean them all here. I have a little saying, you don't want to see me do the dirty dishes. Maybe you do want to see me do the dirty dishes. But I'm going to use a metal polish. I'm going to use 4.0 steel wool, which is the finest steel wool available. Don't go any coarser than 4.0. And to do the dishes, you just simply wrap it on the bar. You can remove that bar if you want. If it's a severe corrosion, you can. And then get the reel seat as well while you're at it. And that chrome polish is it's a car polish. There's other things on the market that you can certainly use. I had a lot of luck with that one. But if you like, go ahead and try a metal polish to take the surface junk off. And again, this reel was fairly clean, but I did notice a little greening, so go ahead and do something like that. And it's all that requires is a little bit of elbow grease. The back end of this bearing here has got some junk on it, so I'm going to use a cotton swab. Get the junk out of there. Bearings should be oiled. I'm going to use, in this case, a Penn Precision oil. You don't have to use the manufacturer's oil. You can use any oil that's designed for fishing reels. Sometimes you'll see me, I use Reel X as well as an alternative to that. And then before I put that spool back in, again, there's a little bit of crud on that spool. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that off with that metal polish. If you really had some severe corrosion on this one, you probably could go try chip it off. But I do recommend that the corrosion be taken off before reinstall. Alright, so I decided we weren't going to do the dishes, and we wound up kind of doing the dishes anyway. And then just cleaning out the back of the spool as well. So once I have that completed, I'm going to put some reel grease onto the stud side of this. I'm going to use the Penn Precision reel grease. Again, you don't have to use the manufacturer's reel grease and reel oils for the particular reel. Just make sure that you're using a reel reel oil that's geared for fishing reels as opposed to an automotive grease or a general purpose oil. And then we're just going to get the dirt off the inside of the spool on this side, even though we're going to come back to that. Okay, dishes are done. Let's go ahead and work on the main assembly. I'll set that off to a side for a moment. The main assembly is like any other Penn Long Beach that's out there, and any other Senator. They're just bigger. So we're going to start by taking the bridge off. The bridge is connecting, 4 screws connect the bridge. Unlike a Jigmaster or that, you don't have to pull the trim ring here to get that out. You have the clearance to take that out without removing that internal trim ring. I guess if you wanted to do a real thorough cleaning, you could pull that, but it's not necessary. I cup my hand behind the reel as I do this. There are 3 springs in there. 2 of them are yoke springs, and one of them is a spring that controls the anti-reverse dog. And if you don't want to fly and you don't want to spend a lot of time on your desk looking for where that piece went, it's a good thing to kind of do what I'm doing here and cup your hand. One of the viewers wrote in a comment the other day, which something that I thought was very good. Jack wrote in and said one of the ways he does it is he takes it like this and then he puts it into a Ziploc bag, like a gallon Ziploc bag, and then pushes the bridge through. That way, if that spring wants to fly, at least it lands in the bag and not on the floor somewhere. Okay, so I've just pushed the assembly through. There's going to be an anti-reverse dog right here. And in this case, we have a flat bar spring. There's 2 types of springs that Penn uses. One is a flat bar spring. The other one would be a coil spring. And in this case we have the flat bar spring, and that generally can be reused. Alright, so up top it looks just like any other Penn reel, and the screws, although bigger, and all the pieces though bigger, pretty much are the same technology. On the screws we have a partially threaded screw and a fully threaded screw. The fully threaded screws go on the bottom, the partially threaded screws go on the top through those yoke springs. Where are those yoke springs? They're underneath here. So I'm going to push the yoke down. I'm going to take the jack off the assembly. I'm going to take the yoke and the spool gear off, and we're going to just set these yoke springs aside for a moment just so that they don't get lost. That gives us access to the back end of the plate, and the back end of the plate, just like with the other one, has some accumulated grease. We're going to go clean that up. Again, general servicing. So folks ask, you know, when and how frequently should you service a reel? And the answer that I give them is at least once annually. It all depends on usage. We're going to flood that bearing with the Penn oil. All depends on usage. If you had a couple of trips, then I would say the annual is a good thing. And again, this doesn't take a lot of time to do this, and if you're watching the video, you're probably going to do it yourself. So do it once a year. It takes 20, 30 minutes maybe. There's no rush. It's not a speed record thing or anything. Do it at the beginning of the season or the end of the season, either way. I generally like to think the end of the season is a little bit better, because if you have the junk that's accumulated over the course of the season, then you're cleaning it up and not letting it sit over the winter time or what have you. Checking the teeth right now on that gear, just making sure that there's no bends or disruptions in it. Notice the gear has two sides. It has a slotted side and it has a flat side. The flat side goes inside. The slotted side grabs the shoulder of the spool here, and that's what turns the reel. So make sure when you go to reassemble it, the slotted side is outside. And we're going to go ahead and put this back because we've done the cleaning that's necessary there. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit of blue grease onto the collar of the yoke. Again, that's the Penn Precision reel grease. We're going to go ahead and put the gear in place there. I'm going to go grab those two springs, the yoke springs. The yoke springs sit in the indentations in the side plate, so it's not necessarily a balancing act. They're kind of sitting there as to begin with. A little bit of grease onto the teeth of that main gear so that it operates smoothly. You don't want to over oil these things or over grease these things. You just want to give it enough that keeps it lubricated. You don't have to get in every tooth. As it spins, it will distribute itself better. Okay, a little bit of the blue grease up top. Now we just do what we do to reassemble, which is get the holes aligned with the springs, push down, grab the jack, and just reset it like that. So that's the way that the top works. Let's go over to the bottom of the reel then. We can pull the whole gear assembly off, sometimes easier than others. The gear assembly starts with a hard piece of plastic on the bottom and a series of 10 drag washers. Before I get there, I'm going to pull the gear sleeve off as well. This is a service, so you want to make sure that that you're doing everything that you can to make sure that the reel is maintained properly. So we want to get behind that gear sleeve, and I have a punch pin that I use. It's actually the bottom of a small awl that kind of broke apart, but it serves this purpose very well for me. You want to grab that and a little hammer and just tap the pin out that's in the gear assembly here. This may be off camera at the moment. I need a little bit of leverage here. So there's a little pin, back on camera, a little pin. The pin gets pushed through with the piece I use, and then you should be able to just pull it off. And it's a good thing I did. This grease is pretty thick on here, so we want to take that steel wool again and just kind of make sure that you're cleaned off. You can see the change in the color of the shaft already. And while I'm at it, I'm going to get that green stuff that's off the bridge. Now that's cosmetic at this point. It's not affecting the moving parts, but you want to clean it up. Now here it would affect the moving parts because it's inside that sleeve area, and it's where the reverse dog works. So go ahead and take the time to make sure that you've got that done correctly. Once you did, you can go ahead and reassemble that gear sleeve. Again, I'm going to use some blue grease. Now, Penn makes this so that you can take the handle screw off and put some oil in there, and that's fine. But as long as you got the sleeve off, it doesn't hurt to put the blue grease on. And I would watch it. I wouldn't overload this because over time that grease will coagulate and collect in those grooves on the inside shaft. And if that's the case, it's going to affect the spin on it. Okay, you want to put this back in. Whoops. You got to be dead on with this one, otherwise it's not going to fit properly. Sometimes you can push it through, sometimes you have to tap it through. And what I'm trying to do right now is just kind of tap it through. Sort of like nailing. You want to make sure that it doesn't stick out like this. You have to complete the whole piece. I'm using a soft blow hammer here. You don't want to use a metal hammer. That's for fear of knocking on the threads or other things. But you got to get that piece down below the collar, otherwise your main gear will not go back on. So that's properly set now. No protrusion on either side. Okay, with that, there was a hard washer that went behind it. And then there's a stack of 10 drags. So I'm just going to turn this upside down and see if we can't get them all out. Ha, we did. And these drags are in good condition. I can tell just by the first one. If you're ever going to have any wear on the reel, it's always going to be the one sitting here. I'm just going to take that steel wool very quickly and just kind of clean out that channel there. And then what we do for the drag service, well, I guess I got a protruding there. Shouldn't be. There we go. Just a little. I use a Cal's Universal drag grease for that. The drag grease you want to use is for the purposes of keeping the washer flexible. These washers have been replaced in its lifetime. These are HT100 washers here. So you just want to put a thin coat on it. Again, another reason for using that glove, just work that grease into the washer so that you have a nice even sheen across there. You don't need to glob it on. With the metal ones, you just want to make sure they're clean like this one is. So you go with a fabric washer, then you go with the metal washer, a fabric washer, and this one has 2 eared washers in the set. So the next one on is going to be the ear washer. Now if they came out of sequence, if you kind of had them dump out on you or you weren't quite sure, go back to that schematic. That schematic is going to show you how those drag washers line up from the post outwards, so you can see in this case we had the hard plastic, the main gear, we had the first fabric, then we had a metal, then we had a fabric, then you see the ear washer number 7, then back to the 6 metal washer and so forth. So go back to that schematic if you've gotten lost or you're somewhat disoriented with the parts moving across your bench or something. If you needed to clean these, go ahead and use the steel wool. I wouldn't recommend putting a cleaner on it at that point. You want to keep this as much metal as you can, so I would just use a little bit of extra elbow grease there. Okay, we're back to the second and last of the eared washers. We're back to the fabric washer here. And you just refer back out and see that you've got fabric, metal fabric, and then the gear sleeve. Somebody put this in backwards, I think, when they did the last service. It just looked unusual to me, so I figured I'd check the schematic, and sure enough. So it goes metal, and last of the fabric washers. And then this one, this is a felt washer sitting on a collar. Let me just take that off for a moment so that you can see. And felt washers get oil. And actually, when you go to oil these, that's probably the way to go do it. Just make sure that you get it wet, but not ridiculously wet. Okay, that's done. So we're back to putting this bridge together now. And the only difference here is that on the left-hand side reel, the anti-reverse dog is in the front as opposed to the back. You can actually see the stud here. that if you had a right-hand sided reel, you would put that in. But in this case, because the gearing is turning opposite, you need to have that anti-reverse dog there. So in order to set the anti-reverse, then I'm going to go ahead and install the washers and the main gear plate, and we're going to take this halfway through. Now if the washers fall through on the other side, that's okay. Again, you can service these drags without dealing with the removal of this bridge, so don't get too crazy if they fall out the front. Just go back and remember the sequence to it. Remember, we have two different types of bridge screws. You want the one that's fully threaded for the bottom. Poke that through. Whoops, I didn't hold it when I poked it through. Poke it through like that. Put your finger over it so you can hold it. Here's that anti-reverse dog. It sits on top of the main gear. It's going to intersect with the teeth there. And now we have the flat spring. The flat spring is going to go along this channel and then come up and sit on top of the anti-reverse dog. I got the anti-reverse dog down a little bit too proud at the moment. You want to keep that anti-reverse dog on top of the main gear. Like that. Okay, now I'm going to take that. Now this is odd for me because I don't work at this angle. I'm so used to it going the other way. So I'm going to apologize in advance if I don't get this set up the first time. Actually, I should move it over the other way. It's just, this is the only difference on the lefty reel. That if your muscle memory says to do it the other way, this is the one that gets you. Okay, we're set now. So you can see how it rests along the channel here around the pin on top of the anti-reverse dog. Once you have that, just slide the bridge assembly the rest of the way over. And just want to get the lightest of set on these. As soon as you feel that the screw is taking, then move up top, go across with the partially threaded one, and seat that into the bridge on the other side. Now there are very tight tolerances here. If you crank down on the one screw, you may not get the others seated properly. So just kind of work your way around accordingly until you get all four of these set. And you can see quickly, just turn it around, that'll tell you that you got them set. And with this one, you have a floating bearing in the back case, so this is a good time to just make sure you push that through properly there. Okay, so with that, then we tighten in an X pattern, kind of north, south, east, west, a couple of turns, and repeat. All right, and then then you can tighten down fully once you have them all snug. The quarter of a turn maybe on each. There you go. So that's the servicing on that. All right, back to the top then. We had the collar. We had a thicker, there's two of these washers. One of them a little thicker than the other. The thicker one belonged on the bottom. Then we have the star drag. I'm going to just use that steel wool to take the gunk off of that while I'm at it. Take your time with this. You don't want to cross thread this one. If you cross thread it, you have to go get a new gear sleeve. There you go. I hold the gear sleeve with my finger, as you can tell. And this one will be the next one on, but I'm going to leave that there. I like to put the assembly back onto the reel before I put the handle on. It just makes tightening the screws a little bit easier. Last thing we need to do here is just a little bit of blue grease onto the shaft of the spool on this side. Remember I told you we'd come back to that. We're back to that now. We're going to go ahead and mate the two. And then we're going to line it up accordingly. So I'm going to get this started now. Remember, we have the two different size screws here. We have the case screw and we have the crossbar screw. The crossbar screws are the longer ones, and then we have the shorter one, which is going to be the reel seat. And I like to, again, just kind of go north, south, east, west, just to get it set first. And then I know I have this this harness key that's got to go in the next. So that harness key goes in here, so we want to make sure that get that set earlier rather than later. we go, somewhat close on that. And then once I get that in, we can go do the other 4 or 5. We'll give it a test drive, and then we'll know we have a nice reel ready to go for the next season. Okay. Once I have that, I want one more balance point. I want to go across here again, that north, south, east, west kind of a thing. Before I go tightening anything down fully, there's a lot of screws on this reel. That's okay. It's probably only one more than like a Long Beach, but what you want to do is, now we can tighten down. So let's call that south. We'll go north. Tighten this one down. You want to keep even pressure and torque onto the side plate. You don't want to warp it. You don't want to make it bind in any way, because it's only going to affect the performance of the reel. Okay, we got that. There's 2 more long ones, 2 more short ones. If you're paying attention, you know that the short ones go below in the reel seat. And that's kind of interesting here, because you have the 2 crossbars in the reel seat right next to each other here. So we're going to preload them here. Folks ask about using a mechanical screwdriver. I'm not crazy about that. I mean, I can see what's going on. There's a lot of turning going on here. If your hands hurt, if you don't have the hand strength, I would tell you go ahead and do that, but leave it short. Don't finish it down all the way. When you get this way, leave it a little proud, and then go ahead and tighten the last 1 or 2 by hand from the turn standpoint. Why is that? Well, those mechanical screwdrivers have an awful lot of torque in them. Referring to something like this, if you have one of them, you can strip that screw out, or you can tighten it down and break a nut or something, just because you've overloaded it with the torque. So use your hand to tighten them if you can. All right, we're back to the last piece. We remember that there's a washer that goes up top. We put that washer on, and you might remember we have that washer to go. The handle goes on. This is a leverage handle, so it has two sections to it. A handle screw. Now, if we didn't put the blue grease onto the shaft, we could have put oil in here, and you can do that on a regular basis in terms of keeping it properly maintained. Tighten down that nut just a little bit. Make sure that the handle nut is on. Call it a nut, it's a screw. You want to line that indentation up with the set screw. Put the little set screw in. And then we can give it a test drive. Okay. Test drive, quick crank, working beautifully. There you go. So that's how you do the Penn 9.0. As I said, everything is pretty much the same, with the exception on the left-hand drive that you're going to set the anti-reverse dog on the other post. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please indicate it by liking it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.